Okay. Here's something that people need to understand about the current. So I'm going to explain the current system, like the current system that we have. We have our current speed system. I don't know why that's so thick, bruh. Which is, let's say, 1200, right? 1200-ish, okay? Now, a lot of times combat happens within, you know, sometimes the combat might happen up here in that speed zone. Sometimes the combat might happen here, and sometimes the combat might happen here, right? Now, when I say combat happening, I mean within a relative delta of 200, right? So what I mean by that is if two ships are fighting, okay, so they're circling each other this way, circling each other this way, they might be circling each other like this, right? Where they're both kind of moving this overall direction, but they're circling as they continue to fight, right? That's what we kind of currently with the speeds right now. Now with the new system, what we're doing is they're separating this so that fights happen basically like this, okay? Anything in here is hard capped like that, and anything from this point on is all, you know, space quantum maneuvering or whatever, quantum mode, right? Standard quantum mode, and this is standard control mode, right? Or SCM. Now the play in this zone is going to be anywhere from, like, I mean, from what they've told us, right? You know, anywhere from 0 to say 300, right? And that is subject to change, right? That might go up to 500 maybe at one point. I don't know, right? Thank you for the sub, brother, or the follow. Welcome to Imperial Navy, right? But that's subject to change relative to what's going on with what Yogi's team is doing and what they want ships to feel like and all that stuff, right? Now, the problem is if you do racing, right, and low flying and that kind of stuff, sometimes it's nice to be at this point in the spectrum, you know, like up at the higher end for the kind of low, you know, low flying kind of stuff, right? And it, you know, you get that real sense of speed, you get that real visceral kind of feeling, which I'm all for, right? I'm all for that, right? So how does the differences between these two systems affect disengaging, right? Now, number one, we talked about an option which I agree with, is that I should not be forced, okay, into this right here, where it's like, oh, you want to survive? You're forced to bring an escort, right? I understand that that is not a viable option for some people, and that's not a viable option all the time. Right? Now, if you're going into a specifically dangerous area that you know there's going to be a lot of people there to engage. I know I probably spelled it wrong, but who cares? It's the morning. Jesus Christ. Escort. All right, escort. Let's just, whatever. Option number 2 will be a scout. Okay? So option number 2 is a scout. And 3 will be, I guess you could call it, whatever, right? You're going to guess or take a risk. You're just going to hope that nobody's there, right? That's what we currently have right now, okay? The argument is, with this new system, I won't be able to disengage, or in this case, like, how do I disengage? First of all, with the current system we have, you can't disengage. Like, you can't, okay? You can tricord, you can get away, but if you're in any kind of hauling ship, let's take a freelancer, for example, right? Let's take a freelancer. So a freelancer is trying to run away. You know, it's shaped like, oh God, here we go again. God damn it. It even looks like it. There's the little side tail mounts, and then here's the turret on the top here, and then it's weird like sideways thing that sits on top of it. And then it's big turret guns on the side, right? Okay, that's your freelancer, right? It's a little better. I really wanted to make sure I didn't make it look like something else. Ripped. Here we have our freelancer, right? Now, here's the reality. All right, I'm going to draw that speed spectrum again, right? and we're topping out. Does anybody know off the top of their head what the top speed of a freelancer is? I can't remember. I think it's like 1,020 or something like that. I don't know exactly what the actual speed is for the Lancer, right? Somebody's gonna say I have a size 9 freelancer in my pants. Okay, so let's say it's 1,000. Yeah, it's not 1,000. It's less. Okay, okay. Well, 900 then, right? Let's say it's 900. Now a Gladius is significantly faster. Okay, but it's all relative, right? So the Gladius is faster by I don't know, 1232. So roughly 332 meters per second closing distance. Okay, 332 meters closing distance at top speed. And that's not to mention accelerations, right? Because if you catch the Freelancer at lower speed, the Gladius is going to be able to much more quickly engage this Freelancer, right? So our closing distance is sitting at 300, which is significantly faster than what we would have with the new system, right? Now here's the new system, right? New system is as follows. Here we have our speed spectrum, right? But we're locked to our top speed, which will be, let's say for the Freelancer, we don't know this speed, but we're going to assume it's probably at 300, right? In space. I'm not talking atmosphere because that's a different tuning, right? Just in space for this one, right? Our Gladius accelerational difference is something like, I'm going to draw the Gladius here. I shall just draw the arrow. It's a little easier, right? So here's our arrow, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to give our arrow, let's say 390, okay? Now the relative accelerational distance is going to be 90 meters per second, right? So is that faster or slower than 332 or whatever we had before, right? It's significantly slower. So the delta, which means the average accelerational distance to close onto a target, is going to be much smaller, which means the time it takes, and this is important, the time it takes for me to realize that there's a threat and start moving away from him is shorter, right? Or is much longer with this new system, right? So unless he's right on top of me right away, okay? Okay, so I'm talking disengage theory here. So you might ask, well, why don't I just slam her into QC mode and off I go? Right? Well, I think what will happen, and again, right, this is my assumption from the information I've gathered from streams and from people I've spoken to, is if you were to imagine a combat bubble that would engulf, you know, the fighter, right? So the maximum targeting distance, let's say for a missile system, and again, this is completely up to balancing changes, right? But I'm talking the mechanical side of it here, right? So if you're at high speed, let's say you're at, I don't know, you're at the top of your 900 meters per second. You're at the top of your, I don't know, quantum mode, right? You're in travel mode. You're going real fast, right? You're going 900 meters per second, right? And you are outside of, let's say, again, right? Outside of whatever, we're going to assume here, again, 5,000 meters, because that's what we currently have. 5,000 meters is our targeting zone, right? And we're in our arrow, we're kind of cruising around at 300, just kind of, you know, doing S-turns, just doing our thing, right? And we see a Freelancer pop up on radar. He's a few kilometers away because he's close enough to us. I target him, I launch a missile, okay? And the missile is able to track and target until it hits its target, right? Even though he's going 900 meters per second, the missile is going to be able to turn and chase. You know, let's say the missile chase is at, I don't know, 1,300 once it's at top speed, right? And as long as it's within, you know, let's say its maximum range is 15 kilometers, not 150, 15 kilometers, km, then the missile's going to hit, it's going to impact, it's going to do some damage, right? So that's option number one, right? So how do we disengage that? So like I was saying before in the video, we can either drop to SCM speeds, right? And then engage in a proper disengagement theory where we get away from that 5,000 meter cone, right? Or two, we use our turret, which I think would be really interesting. I mean, there's so many ways to disengage here. Like I want to get into all of them here because it's actually quite interesting, right? Because if we assume for a second that this turret is optional and functional, right? If we're traveling this direction and we have a hostile arrow behind us and he's shooting missiles at us, right? And we tune those missiles properly, what's stopping us from using our guns to shoot those missiles down, right? So it basically becomes a game of deciding whether or not to risk going to QCM or rather run until the quantum drive is engaged. Right, so as far as I understand, you can turn on the quantum drive, right? So like if I'm in like, let's say I'm in normal mode, right? Let's say my location is Crusader, right? So I'm trying to go to Crusader, right? And I'm running away from this arrow. I'm at 5 kilometers, okay? And I'm closing at, let's say 100 meters per second, okay? So if I'm closing at 100 meters per second, how long until I cross 5 kilometers, right? So if I'm moving 100 meters per second, okay, and I want to cross 5K, how long is that? It's 50 seconds, right? So I basically have 1 full minute, almost 1 full minute at 5 kilometers before this freelancer is within weapons range of this arrow, okay? You're not in quantum whatever mode, right? Because we've decided that we're within 5,000 meters, so we are dropping to standard control mode rather than quantum control mode, right? We're not in quantum control mode. What we're doing is we're explaining how to disengage in standard control mode, because the reality is this: once you get within a certain range, like once you get within 5,000 meters, I don't know what CIG's distance is gonna set for like the danger zone, basically, right? You know, if they set it at 5K, it's 5K. If they set it to 10K, if they set it to 12K, I don't know what the distance. That's a tuning thing, right? But mechanically, once you get close enough to let's say a fighter, if you're still in standard quantum mode, you are at risk of receiving effective fire, right? And effective fire in the sense of if you have missiles and you fire it at him, it's likely that they're going to hit. So in order for you to deal with those missiles is you're going to have to drop to standard control mode and engage, right? Now there's 2 problems here. One, people argue, well, this forces me to fight, because previously in the system that we were using before is we wouldn't need to fight because I could just stay at super high speed and I would just be able to run. But that's just simply not the case. In the current system we have, you cannot run. You cannot run. If you're in a freelancer, a starfarer, a caterpillar, a prospector, anything that's mining or non-combat related cannot run away from combat ships right now. You can't run away from light fighters. You can't run away from medium fighters. You surely can't run away from heavy fighters. So this argument, I feel like I find quite silly, because a lot of people were giving me flack for this in the previous video. Is like, well, Avenger, then, you know, you're forcing me to fight. It's like, well, they're forcing you to fight right now without quantum mode. Like, just what we have in 317.1 or /318, you can't run away. If I bring a Mantis, you can't get away from 20 kilometers. Like, you can't get outside of 20K and run away, right? So I'm trying to explain to you how you would get away in the new system and kind of put some people's fears a little bit at rest, because I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how disengaging happens in what we have now versus what might be something that we can do in the new system, right? Okay, so we agree that if we're in standard control mode, okay, our top speed might be slower. But again, if this arrow if this arrow is going to be smart and thinks, I'm going to get closer, I'm going to reduce that distance by switching into quantum mode and accelerate up to my target here. I mean, that's just silly, because all you'd have to do is if you notice that change, just shoot a missile at him. Boom, you've dealt with your attacker, right? So the person pursuing you is not going to switch into quantum mode either, because that's going to put him at risk, right? So it's a counterplay, right? Yeah, it's SCM and SQM, right? So I'm not going to go into SQM. Like, we're going to try our best to not engage in SQM as much as possible, because SQM is going to turn our shields off. It's going to make us less combat effective to the point of basically being non-combat effective, right? So that's why in the video, when one of the devs says, hey, I had someone on my scanners and I'm not really sure if this person is going to be friendly or he's going to be hostile, but just to be safe, again, I like what he says, just to be safe, I'm going to drop down to standard control mode and see what he does, right? So in standard control mode, how do we disengage, right? I think that's something that people are really missing is energy management, right? So at the present time, when I put full power, again, I have my 3 bars, right? I have my 3 bars. I have engines, I have weapons, and I have shields, okay? So, and I can put different charge levels into each of those, right? I can put, let's say, 100% into this one, or this one, right? And I'm chasing. Let's draw a C2 here. All right, let's draw a C2 here. It's somewhat like a C2. I think that's kind of what a C2 looks like, right? Something like a C2, right? Right. I don't know. It's kind of a silhouette of a C2, right? And this C2 is running at full speed, right? It's engines, weapons, and shield systems. Okay, engines, weapons, shields. It's going to have 100% into its engines. Okay, I'm probably going to have 100% into my weapons once I'm able to start engaging the target here, right? Now, at the current time, with 317.2's flight model, at the current time, said my 3-year-old has, oh, he's drawing an elephant. Okay, stay with me, guys. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Okay? At the current time, in 317.2/318, probably, because we're not going to get updates until 318, is as long as I stay outside of, let's say, 500 meters, okay, so if I'm shooting at this range, and I'm pew, 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 firing in, any return fire that I'm getting from the turrets, okay, is going to be largely ineffective against a counter-maneuvering light fighter, right? Basically, as long as I don't get within that distance, which is very easy once you understand how to fly your ship, this C2 Hercules is really no threat to whatever it's attacking, right? Which is a problem, because what if you have, 5 guys all loaded up into C2? Like, they're basically screwed, right? The only chance they have, or the only hope they have, is to just basically tank whatever it's getting shot at from. But if you have a mantis that's stopping you from warping away, like, it's over. Like the fight is over. There is absolutely nothing that this multi-crew ship can do against a gang of people. And they don't even have to be light fighters. I mean, you could probably kill a C2 Hercules if you had a gang of prospectors, because the prospectors have okay acceleration. I mean, you've got 10 G's of acceleration on a prospector. All you would have to do is stay outside of 500 meters, and you'd be able to kill this C2 Hercules with a gang of prospectors, right? That's what we currently have. And I keep saying that because people think it's some weird thing that, like, oh, what we have now, like, I can disengage. It's like, no, you can't, right? In this new system, here's how it's going to shake up, right? Because combat speeds are lower, okay? Because combat speeds are lower, the opportunity for me to have high energy states and orbit my target, because remember what I said at the beginning of the video, right? The difference, the accelerational difference between, let's say, a freelancer and an arrow was like 300 meters per second, which means I have 300 meters per second to just move anywhere I want to go I want to move in front of him. I want to move behind him. I want to move to the right, to the left. I want to move away. I want to move forward. I have 300 meters per second, which is a crazy amount of speed to play with, to decide whether I want to engage or disengage, right? With the new system, it's going to force fights into a more, if I'm running away, right? So if I'm in a C2 Hercules and I'm running away, okay, I'm full burn, I'm 100% engine power, and this is important, I'm 100% engine power, and the speeds are different, which means my accelerational difference at a top speed of a Hercules will be something like, I don't know, let's say 300 in a Hercules, right? And the arrow is 400, okay? Which means I only have 100 meters per second to try to start making a positional advantage on him, okay? Which, again, is going to be very difficult, because if I'm at 300 and I have all my power into boost, I'm going to be able to stay at 400 meters per second for longer. Now listen, if my acceleration is going this way with my main thrusters, okay, then it forces a chase. Again, it chases, it forces turret gameplay to start returning fire, to cause fighters to start changing their flight path, which makes them cross more distance, which makes them bleed off speed, so that 100 meters per second difference turns to about a 10 meters per second difference real fast, or even into the negatives, which means I start pulling away from my target, right? It allows me to put all my shields to the rear, so it extends the amount of time that someone who's tailing me has to apply damage to me. Like, in this new system, like, you're going to be able to prolong fights a lot longer, which means you're going to have way more time to call for help. It's going to allow turret gunners to not have to worry about trying to track stuff that's like orbiting them at super close range if they're trying to disengage. You know, it's going to allow incoming missiles to be intercepted by the turret gunners, which will help a lot too. And what you're doing is you're basically forcing the fight. You're slowly getting farther and farther and farther and farther away until eventually you get outside of the gun range of the fighters that are chasing you, or it allows you to distance yourself enough that you can go into quantum boost mode or quantum mode outside of the effective range of their guns or missiles, and then just warp away. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. You know, this whole adage of, like, first of all, there's one big question to this that I think people need to understand is, can we go straight into quantum warp from standard control mode? So if I'm aligned, right? So let's say I'm aligned to Crusader, okay? I'm in the Hercules. I'm aligned to Crusader because I'm slowly getting my distance away from whoever's chasing me. My turrets are doing their job. You know, I've called for help. I've done whatever I can. You know, at least this way I have a chance at defending myself, right? Say quantum boost is available at any time. Okay, so then we ask the question. We create that opening so that once we're outside of the weapon range, because again, right, because all of our power is in engines all the time, whereas with these light fighters, if these light fighters are taking shield hits from the turrets, which they will be taking hits from, because the distances will be closer, which means it's more likely that turrets will apply their damage. If the distances are closer, if my power has to switch between weapons, shields, and engines, and I'm switching power between my engines, my weapons, my shields, like, it's gonna take, eventually I'm gonna fall behind on that energy war, because if this Hercules is just 100% into its engines all the time, it's gonna win the energy battle on engines, which means it's gonna always be pulling away from me because it's always gonna be boosting, right? Whereas with the fighters that are chasing, I will simply not be able to boost all the time because I'll be taking hits from the turrets, which means I'll have to charge my shields up, which means I have to take some time away from engines into shields and time away from engines into weapons to like produce fire. There are so many different dynamics that comes to fighting, and this whole idea that you won't be able to defend yourself. It's like in the current system that we have in 3.17, you cannot defend yourself anyway. It literally cannot get any worse. It cannot get any worse for people in the current model we have. In the new model that's coming up, you very much have a fighting chance to get away, right? It's just not getting away in quantum mode, right? If somebody gets too close to you, where they can effectively lock a missile on you and fire, you have to drop the standard control tuning and play the game of chase and get away, right? But if you stay outside of that distance from them, you can stay at high speed you can stay at high speed all day. In fact, that's probably what most people will race or do low flying in. I really want people to understand this, because this is very important, and I'm not hammered, so I will be able to give you a good explanation as to what this new flight model will entail and why there are checks and balances and why the new system actually promotes defense over ridiculous offense like what we have right now in 317, right? Understand, like, the tuning is one thing. Like, the specific numbers will change, right? So like the delta numbers and the overall top speeds for some ships and the amount of time that a ship can boost, that's all relative to tuning. So you must differentiate between flight tuning and a flight model, which is a fundamental shift in mechanics. A flight model change is the addition of quantum control mode, right? So that's why I had concerns about this. In a new system, I would be easier for someone to run away from you. So you're concerned it might be too easy to run away. See, that's funny, Duke, because most people, at least some of the comments in my most recent video, most people are really scared that it's going to be too hard to run away. Now, and also, I will say this. That when I talk about in the previous video, when I talked about at some point you're going to have to fight, I think some people took that the wrong way. I am not trying to tell people that, you know, like I'm not trying to come at it from like this high and mighty PvP position, like ha ha ha, like all you people that aren't interested in PvP, now you're forced to play my game. Assuming that's even my game to begin with, which is not true. That's just simply a mischaracterization of what I said, right? And it's just simply wrong. Okay. The point I was trying to make is, you will have to drop down to standard control mode and force the disengage from there, instead of forcing the disengage from the system that we have now, and also. Again, like I've said before, the system we have now does not, you cannot get away. You cannot get away. A caterpillar cannot outrun anything, because boost doesn't let you go over your top SEM speed, right? So proper power management is going to be really important here. And it's going to lead to people that are better with their power management. And also, people need to understand this too. If the multi-crew ship has a good crew, it's going to be able to reroute power and all that stuff. You're going to be able to get away from the fighters. Like, truly, you will be able to get away.
We would be honored,
you know, at least in this system,
join us.
You have a chance. In the one we have right now, man, like, you're toast. Like, you're absolutely toast. Said the new system just seems like it takes more coordination to fight/escape. But Lizzie, in this system, you can escape. That's the difference. In the new system, you actually can get away, whereas with the current system we have, you simply cannot get away, no matter how quote-unquote good you are. And on top of that, what's even worse is that you can't get away and you can't take a fight. So not only can you not get away, but you also can't win fights in multi-crew ships as it stands right now in 317. Okay? In the new system, you can get away and you can take a fight, but it requires you to drop down into standard control mode and get into that metric, right? people need to have this mindset, like this mindset shift of quantum coordinate, like quantum control mode is meant for crossing distances and getting to your locations. But the game will play in these lower speeds because that's where all the mechanics come in. Right now, I think the issue is too easy to disengage and re-engage in a fight. The flight model seems it will make so much... Okay, so Captain Ando, that is because it's too easy to engage and disengage relative to fighters themselves rather than fighters to multi-crew ships, right? Fighters to multi-crew ships, there's no question, you cannot run away. Fighters to fighters, like disengaging is much, much easier. And it leads to fights taking a lot longer, and it does lead to like a really high skill ceiling to some degree, but it also makes for gameplay that I wouldn't consider to be the best that Star Citizen could possibly become. If Pyro came out with the current flight control system that we have, nobody would survive. Not one. Like, they would all die. The only people that wouldn't die would be people with escorts. Now, I'm trying to argue for options without the need for escorts, which I personally think, again, I'm speaking for combat here, is a bit silly. If you're going to a very dangerous area of space, if you're not going to bring an escort, for God's sake, at the very least, bring a scout. Like, bring a scout. Please, for the love of God, bring a scout. Because at the very least, the scout can go ahead and it can go like, oh, wow, don't come here because there's like a gang of fighters and this and that and whatever. And you can find another path to your objective. But flying blind with a freighter into lawless areas of space... Like, what? Like, come on. I just, I just don't get it. That's just a failure in understanding threat assessment. I'm a bit confused by what you're saying about not being able to escape now. In the current system, you can get away in larger ships. They have large enough shields to quantum away before your shields get taken. Okay, that's Hammer. Let me explain something. That's a great question, and here's what I'm gonna show you here. Okay, here's arrow number 1 and arrow number 2. Okay, just because a pirate group is probably not gonna fly by themselves. Okay, here's the Mantis, something like that, right? So, tell me right now how you intend to get away from 2 light fighters and a Mantis, which have you interdicted. The question is, you don't. You cannot. You can't, right? So yes, you can get away from the hyper casuals that basically see somebody and go like, ha, there they are, bang, 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 and shoot at them for a little bit and then they just warp off. You're still going to be able to do that with the new system. If someone is there and they're like, oh, there's a freelancer here, and they shoot at you a little bit, just stay in standard control mode and just fly off. Like, fly away and turn your quantum drive on, because that arrow has nothing to stop you from warping. Just get away from them and then warp off. Just put all power to your boost, get some distance, boost away. And, it might take a little bit longer for you to get away from them, but you'll get away. How are you going to get away from an interdictor? It's just, you're not. You know what I mean? And the problem is, once these fighters engage you, there's nothing you can do to win that battle. Do you really think, and this is, I'm going to ask this question for you guys, right? Do you really think that when piracy becomes lucrative, so when I board and steal the cargo of a $20 million, like a 20 million REAs, AUEC, whatever, loaded freighter that's totally undefended, if I board that ship and steal 20 million credits in 20 minutes, you don't think people are going to make sure that they have a mantis the next time? Or that, do you know what I mean? And so like if we go into piracy with the new system, like all these guys that are shipping stuff from point to point, it's going to be like piranhas in the water. People are going to start pirating, and it's going to be so bad, so fast, because freighters and other ships of the like will not be able to get away with the current system. So, yes, you can disengage quickly at the present time in 17.2 from people who are unprepared, undertrained, and undermotivated to get you. But when you introduce piracy and it starts becoming very lucrative for pirates to do piracy, they are going to be very trained. They're going to make a lot of money, so they're going to be very motivated to do it. And they're also going to be very skilled at what they're doing. And that's who are the people that you have to protect yourself from. That's why I always advocate for people to understand the fundamental pillars of flight so that they have a choice and a chance to get away, right? Protecting yourself from the casuals, anybody can do that. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to protect you guys for when you have a $20 million loaded Hull C or Hull A or Crusader Hercules, and you want to get that $20 million to your location so that you can make 10 million. I want that to be the case. But in order for that to happen, you must be trained. You must know your threats. You must know how to defend yourself, and you must know how to get away, right? This attitude of like, well, I should just be able to get away whenever I feel like it. It's like, okay, let me know how far that gets you. Because that's not a world in a game where someone like Chris Roberts is it's not gonna happen. There has to be danger. You know, like I genuinely want the best for Star Citizen. I want the best, and again, right? People pigeonhole me, man. They put Avenger 1 in a box and they say this guy only wants everyone to, you know, fight in SCM and this. I'm like, no, man, that's not what I'm talking about. I want a healthy game where we have options. I want a healthy game where we have tactical opportunities to disengage, that we have checks and balances between player skill and ship choice / selection / you know, the overall tactical battle space. And right now in 3.17.2, the tactical battle space comes down to basically 3 ships: the Blade, the Cartual, and the Mantis. Those are the only 3 ships you need. I'm not kidding. The only 3 ships you need in the game are the Blade for DPS and kill power, the Cartual because nothing gets away from the Cartual, and the Mantis so that if it does try to get away, it can't warp out. If you have those 3 ships, every other ship in the game is obsolete. Every ship is obsolete. Hornets, all the fighters, all the vanguards, everything, all obsolete, right? The 3 horsemen of the apocalypse, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to rule the world in Star Citizen, all you do is fly Cartuals so people couldn't run away, Blades to fight, and Mantises to make sure that they couldn't warp out. And then you could basically transfer your cargo with impunity as long as you had an escort, because any other teams that were unescorted would just get smoked. And anything else in terms of choice for combat, like you want to bring an Arrow, you want to bring a Gladius, like any other choice is just a downgrade from those 3 ships I mentioned. Wow, that was one hell of a start to the stream, guys. I think we have discussed in detail the ideas and the opportunities when it comes to disengaging with the new system versus the current system that we have. Is everybody on the same page now? Are there any questions when it comes to understanding the mechanical nature of how to disengage with the new system versus the old system? Are there still any questions? Is it unclear? Did I do a good job explaining it? or should I find another way to explain it so that you guys kind of have a better view at it? Because again, like I've said before, this whole idea that well, Avenger, I don't want to force myself into fights and this and that. I hear you, and I 100% agree with you, but that is currently what we have in 17.1, and also most likely 3.18. You cannot disengage from any kind of coordinated group of PvPers at the current time. You simply cannot get away, right? And if they bring mantises and all that stuff, like effing chat, boys, right? At least with this new system, you have an opportunity to defend yourself, right? It's just not going to be at standard quantum mode. It's not. It's going to be in standard control mode, not standard quantum mode. Quantum mode is meant for traveling distances. If there is any threat to your safety, drop down to standard control mode and engage in that form. But at the very least, put all your power to your engines and beeline it away from whoever's chasing you as quick as possible, and get your turrets there and put pressure on them to push them away and disengage your opponent. You cannot do that with 3.17.1. They will simply get up on top of you, they'll rotate around you, they'll be just outside your range, and there won't be a damn thing you can do about it. And you could have 5, 10, 50 gunners. You could have a fully manned hammerhead with 10 more guns than it normally has, and you'd still lose to 2 arrows, or 2 Gladius, or 2 Blades, or 2 Auroras, or 2 Mustangs, or 2 M50s, or 2 anything, because eventually they'll wear you down and kill you, right? And you won't be able to get away from the Mantis because it's got you at 20k with a warp scram. So your only option is to Alt F4 or wave the white flag and be like, all right, you don't have a ship that can fight that right now. But with the new system, you have a chance, right? And this whole adage of people using trading ships like caterpillars, all that stuff, right? Please, for the love of God, don't get upset when you go to Pyro without a scout, without any training, and this like naivete of like, I'm just gonna go into this rainbow and sunny world where everyone's gonna love each other and we're all gonna fly around Pyro and look at all the cool sights. Like, you will die and they will steal your stuff, and then you will come back after taking your screenshots and they will kill you again and again and again, and they'll put you on forum posts and they'll make fun of you and they'll be like, look at this guy, he's salty because we killed him. That's what will happen. And I don't want to see people leave the game because they're too naive or they're too stubborn to understand the threats and understand also that there are options for you to disengage. There are options for you to fight back. There are options for you to stay safe. But it doesn't include just blindly going into a dangerous area with no scout, no escort, or no knowledge or understanding of how to disengage properly. So, rant over.